We are going to begin the funeral service for Mrs. Behar. If you have a cell phone, I'd ask you kindly to place it into silent mode or turn it completely off at this time. I'd also like to welcome everybody attending via live stream. On behalf of the family, thank you. Services will be conducted by Rabbi Barry Schechter of Congregation Kol Emeth in Skokie.
Mizmor David, Adonai, mi Yakub yolecha, mi yishkon behar kodshecha, uleich tamim, ufoil et tzedek, v'dover emet bilvavo, lo regal leshono, lo asal reyehu ra, v'cherepa lo nasa al kerovo. Nivze beinav nimas, v'et yirei Adonai yechabed, nishbar ra, v'lo yamir, Kaspo lo natan ben neshech, v'shochad al makil ol akach. Oseile lo yimot li'olam. God, who may abide in your house, who may dwell in your holy mountain, those who are upright, who do justly, who speak the truth within their hearts, who do not slander others or wrong them or bring shame upon them, who give their word and come what may do not retract, who do not exploit others, those who live in this way shall never be shaken. Dear friends, we're here for a sad and difficult occasion to say goodbye, which is one of the most difficult things we can ever do, but also to pay tribute and to honor the memory and, even if possible, to celebrate the life of Olema Behar, the daughter of Jose and Matilda, Sarah Bat Avraham, who's gone to her eternal rest at the age of 91 and who leaves a family and friends who loved her very, very dearly. First, I should mention her late husband, her life's partner, Nissin, Dr. Nissin, who passed in 2020, and to whom she was married for 55 years, even though they had dated quite a number of years before then, so it was a lifetime together. Here we have the children, Jose, Nissin and his Cindy, and Israel, and grandson, golden grandson, Jeremy. Also, I should mention her late siblings, her sister, Maria, who's known as Olga, and her brother, Jose, and also Rigoberto and his Zoila, and also her sisters-in-law, Nissin's sisters, Berta and her late husband Moses, and Hilda and her late husband Pedro. And we're going to begin by hearing from the family. So I'm going to call first of all on Nissin to come up and speak to us about his mother.
Mami Olema, Tia, Mema, and Abuela, otherwise known as Jose, Israel, and Tito's mom. I'm Tito. She was born in Cuba, began life with a very long name, Olema de la Caridad Fernandez Raya. She was the youngest of 4 siblings. Her father passed when she was a child. Her older siblings worked to put her through college to become a teacher. She taught grade school for 10 years until my parents started our family. Family was everything to my mom. She treasured family. She ran a tight ship household, everything in its place, everything spick and span. Because of this, she did a great job keeping us in order. If we thought we were getting away with shenanigans, we would get the "Tú no sabes quién soy yo" message, which translates to "You have no idea who you're dealing with." Mommy had a way with words. She would say Spanish phrases that kept us in line. She would give us a look and say, "Eres más loco que la cabra. You're behaving crazier than a goat." "Niño, pero qué es eso?" "Child, what's the matter with you?" My mom was loud. I think she thought she had to yell into the telephone for the other person to hear her. No matter where we were in the house, you could hear her telephone conversation. We would be watching TV downstairs, doing homework upstairs. There was no doubt we could hear what she was saying. My mom cared for others, not only for my dad, my brothers, my cousin Rosa, but anyone that needed a helping hand. When my uncle suffered a stroke, she had him stay at our house so she could make sure he recovered. My mom was also a wonderful cook. That was her way of giving love to everyone. She cooked all the time. One of the first things she did in the morning was plan for dinner. Meat defrosting on the counter, the rice cooker ready. The breakfast she made me were traditional Cuban. Toast and café con leche, which is coffee and milk. I must have been the only caffeinated fifth grader at Fairview South sent to school with a shot of espresso in his stomach. I loved it. My wife Cindy even had a full-blown Cuban delicious meal the first time she met the Behars. This was the start of building a precious bond with her future daughter-in-law. My parents took her in as their daughter. My mom was happy to have another female around after living in a household with 4 males. She treated Cindy as her own daughter. When my parents were planning to move from the city to Skokie, my mom learned how to drive at just 44 years old. Most people walked in the city, so driving in the suburbs was crucial for her to learn. I can remember the driver Ed car would pick her up in front of the apartment building. My grandparents lived in a nearby building. My mother looked out the window and saw my mom get into a strange car with a strange man. She immediately called my father at his work and wanted to know what was going on. The strange man was actually the driver's ed teacher, and the strange car was the Adams School driver car. My mom, with her limited English-speaking skills, did her best to engage in the Skokie community. She was one of the lunch lady volunteers who sold tokens at the school cafeteria. She was part of the Kolem Sisterhood. She was one of those moms who would prepare bagels, cream cheese, and the fixings while we attended junior congregation on Saturdays. She always made an effort to be involved in our daily lives. As we got older and moved out of the house, my mother's love for family extended into the next generation. She cared for my cousin Rosa's son, Pedro, her grandnephew, when he was a toddler. Cooked for him, played, sang, danced with him. In 2005, she was blessed with a grandchild of her own, Jeremy. My parents would come over every week to babysit him. Abuela would love to make him special lunches. She sang songs for him and played. She was so excited to pamper her grandchild. About 15 years ago, we noticed that something was a bit off with my mom. She started repeating the same story she just finished telling. The cooking she so loved diminished. She would look at a picture album and couldn't recognize family or remember our names or who we were. My parents had a loving and supportive relationship. My father took care of her for so many years after her diagnosis until his passing. The love she taught us gave us so much strength to cope with her illness. She was a true fighter and was going to be there for us, her sons. I'm so grateful to have had a loving and caring mom. Olema battled Alzheimer's on her terms. The disease may have ravaged her memory and body, but deep down inside, she fought for as long as she was able. I'd like to think that she had She held on for so many years to deliver her final "Don't mess with me" message to Alzheimer's. "Tú no sabes quién soy yo."
Thank you, Nissin, for those lovely memories. And now we're going to hear from Jose.
It is difficult to capture in words the woman that was Olema Behar. She was a wonderful wife and a worthy match for my father. She was certainly an extraordinary mother in ways large and small, making sacrifices we didn't even know about at the time, like skipping meals so my brother and I would have food to eat in the years before we were able to leave Cuba. Or after arriving in this country, tucking money away in the ripped black leather bag stored on the top shelf of my parents' bedroom closet so that she could buy us toys, and with that money in that bag that she and my father saved, eventually sending my brothers and me to college. She was an adoring grandmother, and I know how much her heart filled when Jeremy was born. She was a fierce and loyal friend. However, the woman who was born Olema de la Caridad Fernandez Raya was so much more than the sum of those parts, and more than any one thing. She was always formidable, always resilient, always remarkable, a force of will, a force of courage, a force of nature. She was the smartest person in the room, the wittiest, the most cunning, the most fun and the funniest, and often, as my brother said, the loudest. Her only rival for being the loudest was my father. There are some people in this world, we all know them, who can suck the oxygen out of a room. But there are also a precious few who, by their presence, can satiate a room with air to breathe and to laugh. Olema Behar was one of those precious few. There are innumerable stories to be told about my mom, about her amazing bravery, perseverance, and above all, her unparalleled confidence. But most of these stories, sadly, cannot be repeated at a funeral because they almost all involve foul language. Indeed, it is with an enormous amount of pride that I tell you that my mom taught my brothers and me, by way of example, the best curse words and insults known on planet Earth in any language. Salty language aside, her kindness and generosity, both of spirit and otherwise, and her grace were cornerstones. Perhaps even more so were her boldness and her unwavering steadfastness to live life on her terms and on her timeline. When my mother was first diagnosed with Alzheimer's, I must have read at least 100 medical journal articles on the disease and its progression. I remember reading that from time of diagnosis, the average lifespan of the individual is 6 to 8 years. As my brother said, my mom survived Alzheimer's for 15 years. Throughout that time, especially in later years, she was hospitalized several times with grave illnesses, and truly without any exaggeration, often on the verge of death. And through sheer strength and force of will, my mom decided, some way, somehow, that it was not yet her time. Olema Behar defied all odds and was, in a word, a total badass. For these past many years, this awful and merciless disease took my mother's memory and disintegrated her body. She seemed to have forgotten who her husband was, a man she adored, and with whom she spent 65 years of her life, married to him for the last 55 of them before he passed away 3 years ago. It still seems inconceivable to me that my parents dated for 10 years before they got married, but whatever. She seemed to not always recognize my brothers and me. It is very tough to become unknown to someone you love so much. Still, somewhere in that brilliant and entertaining mind of hers, through all that fog, I agree with my brother. She maintained a sense of herself. My mother was supremely, unapologetically, beautifully confident. My brother explained our mom's reaction when we were younger to what he called shenanigans. He's right. But it goes to show the differences between my brothers and me. They, my younger brothers, engaged in shenanigans. I, the older brother, just plain misbehaved and defied our parents. And when I had the extreme misfortune to disrespect my mother, that's when I would get my mom's steely gaze and her strong and steady voice telling me in a very menacing fashion, "Tú no sabes quién soy yo." Emphasis on the yo. Though the phrase does translate into, as my brother said, "You don't know who I am," or "You don't know who you're dealing with," it loses in English the flourish it has in Spanish, especially the way my mom said it and in the tone she used when she said it to me. Regardless, those words out of my mother's mouth always stop me dead in my tracks. And so even at the end, I like to think that my mom held on to who she was. There were still glimpses of her from time to time. When my brothers and I visited her and began to curse in Spanish in front of her, using words she taught us so well, she would suddenly open her eyes wide and laugh. It gave us assurance that, against all odds, once again, she was still in there somewhere. And even if I'm wrong, and in the end, she may have forgotten who she was, it hardly matters, because we remember. We will always remember who she was. She was Olema Behar, and she was everything. Mami, nosotros sabemos quién eres tú. Fuiste una luz en este mundo. Te queremos, te extrañamos. Y ahora por fin puedes descansar en paz.
Thank you. Thank you, Jose and Nissin, for those wonderful, wonderful talks that you just gave. If we don't know what happens after we go, but if she can hear you, she was always proud of you, but she's especially proud of you today. I knew your father. I knew Nissin, your dad, and I knew Olema. I knew your father better than your mother. I would meet them at Congregation Kolemeth. Israel, I taught you. You were in my class at Congregation Kolemeth just a few years ago. And I spoke to your dad more than to your mother because there was more opportunity to meet him. And it's very interesting how one learns certain things, because until I listened to you now or spoke to you as we did the other day, if you'd asked me to describe your parents, I would say, listen carefully, they're a nice, quiet couple. It was quite a shock for me to hear that in terms of volume, well, I was never near your house when your mother was speaking, but from what you're saying, if I just stood outside, I'd have been well aware of how wrong I was in my estimation, because that was the impression that I had. You spoke very movingly, both of you, about how the self-sacrifice that you talked about in early years, in Cuba, of course, but even early years here, and how you talked about her family and how she loved the family, and how she must have learned at home or absorbed, because, as you said, she was educated, she was put through college by her older siblings, by Olga and Jose, both she and Rigoberto. So she came from a family, and I think you'll all know what I'm talking about. Not by no means all families are like this. With the older siblings, I mean, the father had died when she was very little, and they really looked after them. They did everything they could for them, and she absorbed that, and I think absorbed it in such a degree that maybe even more so, because she, as you said, she looked after you, but she looked after you in two ways. She looked after you by giving you wonderful food, and as you mentioned to me, you grew up not only with or you particularly, I don't know if the others had the education, the early childhood education on the subject of caffeine. That did you two have it as well? You also trained in the art of drinking coffee early in the morning at an early age. In the baby bottle, yes. I don't want to know that you took it in with your mother's milk. That would be going too far. But that when she would cook, you were eating foods, although you didn't realize this at the time, of several different cultures. You were eating food that was Cuban. You were eating food that was Spanish, because her parents, one parent and other grandparents, were from Spain. And you were also eating the Sephardic foods that your father's family would have grown up eating, because, of course, Nissin, your father's parents, were Turkish Jews who spoke Turkish and Ladino. And she would cook all these different things. You had no idea that in other families they were strictly limited to one single culture. So you grew up with that. But not only did she do that and show you great love, but as you said, she would deal with any kind, I'm not sure whether I should refer to it, well, shenanigans for two of you and plain misbehavior for the oldest one. But she would let you know, and you both expressed this so vividly, in no uncertain terms. She said it in Spanish. I don't think it would have mattered if whatever language she would have said it in, and she would look at you, and you would know, or as you said, she would stop you in your tracks. She didn't have to do much more. Because there was steely determination there, and as she said, you don't know who you're dealing with, but after a while you did, and you love who you were dealing with. You said she had many friends here who when she came here, of course, the language is a limitation. I say the language is a limitation is very interesting because I've dealt with a lot of people who've come here from other countries. And I know very often if they don't speak English as perfectly as they want to, that actually inhibits them and damages their confidence. But her confidence wasn't damaged by one whit. Not at all. She was there, she was strong, she had her views, which she was, shall we say, not shy to express to anyone. But she had this strength you talked about. You used a wonderful set of superlatives to describe what a force she was. And when she came here, she did make friends she had a large circle of friends, many of them from Colombia. And they would celebrate, they would go to each other's birthdays, they would go to different houses and eat, or they would go to restaurants. I think you said to me they like to go to monasteries on Devon. And you also told me that there were New Year's Eve parties. Your parents knew how to party. Another thing I wouldn't have known from that quiet couple I met in the synagogue. Very interesting. And I think you were all put in the basement for the purpose of these parties. And you told me that, well, you actually told me there was drinking. I wasn't sure whether you meant that you children were drinking. Maybe you were just drinking coffee or something harmless like that. She loved to knit and crochet. If a friend's child, for example, was pregnant, she would be there, she would make something wonderful, a blanket or whatever it was, or even for one of your friends, the same thing. You told me how they took you, both of them, to museums, to parks. You went to every museum in Chicago, to the zoo. You also mentioned to me what we heard before, Jeremy, they would come in to watch you, to look after you. They would be there a couple of times a week. She would cook for you. And she would sing also. In fact, you mentioned how, alas, the Alzheimer's gradually took away so much of her memory and consciousness. But even at a time when her memory was really quite bad, she could remember songs from Cuba from 50 years before. She could still remember those. You said you used this idea of people who don't suck the air out of the room but bring a wonderful fresh air into the room. And you said how if she laughed, and she laughed easily, laughing came naturally to her, how infectious her laughter was, because that happens. If it depends on the person, but there are some people if they can start laughing, you might not even know why they're laughing. They might have thought of something or told a joke, but if they laugh with enough gusto, then other people will start laughing, because there is this wonderful infectiousness about a full body laugh, which she was capable of doing. So her joy would be communicated to others. Others would feel happy and laughing. She liked to watch, you told me, on the TV, there were Spanish soap operas, and you told me, I was quite amazed, I didn't realize that Spanish soap operas, I couldn't believe this, they don't go on forever, unlike American soap operas, where you can start hearing a story. I was telling you about a program in England, a soap opera in England that's been on the radio. It's still going on. It started in 1948. But Spanish soap operas, apparently, they actually end and a new one starts. And she liked to do that. She liked to watch those. They gave her pleasure. They also told me, now who was it who was in Ann Arbor? Who was in Ann Arbor? It was you were in Ann Arbor. And they would come and see you. You two and your parents, that's Israel and Nissin would come with the parents, with Nissin Olema, to Ann Arbor. But it was what you might call a quick visit, because he had to be back at work the next day. And so the two of you, with great joy and enthusiasm, would have to get up and be dressed at 5 a.m. and they drive with your parents to Ann Arbor, which is 4 or 5 hours? At least. Depends how fast. Did your father drive quickly? I'm not sure. Did he drive or did she help with the driving?
My father always drove.
Your father always drove, I understand, yes. So, but in any event, so they come there and be with you for 3 hours because he had to work the next day, and then come home. So you were honored for by a 3-hour visit from your whole family. In the college, I think all of you received care packages, is that right? With all kinds of wonderful food. You get a wheel of Gouda cheese, is that right? And you had to explain this to me, I still don't understand it. Guava paste. Yes. I see, yes. I won't try and say it. Pastel de guayaba. Yes, I got it right. For Passover, for Pesach, you told me growing up, your aunts and uncles and cousins would come, and your Uncle Moses would conduct the Seder, the Pesach Seder, partly in Hebrew and partly in Ladino. So you really, you had culturally, you had a wonderfully diverse upbringing, partly due to your father, but also due to your wonderful mother. When I meet people in the synagogue, I know them more or less, but for me this has been a revelation to hear, not merely what I mentioned before, but the breadth of culture, the joy and the love that you had, and the strength, this incredible strength of this wonderful lady who, as you said, she spread her love. But when you talk about the word spreading, you think if you spread it, then it gets thinner in the middle. It didn't. Not at all. Her love was spread equally to you, to her husband, her life's partner, to cousins, to friends. She really was a lovely, and as you said, a remarkable lady. I just want you to think for 1 second about someone who grows up in Cuba and loses her father at an early age, and then falls in love with a man, becomes Jewish, and then, now, although that adjustment is not huge enough, has to leave their country and go to another country and learn a new language, which is not easy. And with all this, there is this marvelous, life-giving energy and love that just goes on regardless. And that is something quite remarkable. That is something wonderful. So you were privileged to have her. She was a bracha. She was a blessing. And I could hear just from the way you spoke, even without the words, how difficult this is or has been for you and is now at this moment. But I hope and pray that what will happen as time goes on, and however impossible it seems now, it does happen. As time goes on, the sadness, the grief that you feel, the feeling that something ridiculous and terrible and impossible has happened, that someone's taken from us, and the loss and the tear in the heart, You have that feeling, but you also have the other feelings that you spoke about, these wonderful, wonderful memories, that what grows with time are these wonderful memories. And what shrinks with time, it never goes away, but what shrinks is the sadness and the grief. So it becomes more manageable. It doesn't dominate, doesn't press down on us. And I hope and pray that the time will work its healing for you. I know it will, because it does. However, as I say, however impossible it seems at the moment. So we salute this fine lady who gave so much, and because of your memories, will continue to give. Tehei nishmata tzerura b'tzror hachayim. May her soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. That is what I say of her. And to her I say, Olema, Sarah, Lechi b'shalom. Go in peace. May your repose be in paradise, in Gan Eden. You will never be forgotten. You'll always be remembered in love by those who knew you and loved you, and those whom you knew and you loved. Amen. And now we will, if you have these little booklets, if you could open them, and we will, on the left side at the top, we have the 23rd Psalm. Would you join me in reading, please? The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Could I ask you to stand, please, if you can? If it's difficult for you to stand, please remain seated. Now, the three of you are wearing ribbons. If you could help each other to just make a little tear in the bottom of the ribbon, and then I will say a bracha, a blessing with you that we say on these occasions. You could do it for each other, or you could do it if you could do it yourself, just a little tear. And that's a sign of mourning. And now the three of you, if you will join me in this blessing, in this bracha, it's not in there, but it begins the way every blessing begins, Baruch atah, etc. And there are two words at the end, which I will tell you. So would you say with me, Baruch atah Ado Elo Melech Ha'ol Dayan Ha'emet, which means blessed be the true judge. That's what we say when we suffer a loss. Please remain standing. Hail Mare Rachamim, Shochein Mamromim, Hametzei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanefei Ashkina, B'malot Kedoshim Otarim, Kezohar Rakia Masihirim, Et Nishmat Sarah bat Avraham, Olema bat Jose Matilda, Shalcha le'alama bavur, She'anachnu nodrin mitzdaka bi'ad askarat nishmata. Began Eden tehei menuchata, Lachein bala rachamim, Yastireha besete kanafel leolamim, V'yitzror achayim et nishmata. Adonai unachalata, V'tanuach b'shalom al mishkava, V'nomar Amen. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence, and among the holy and pure who shine as the brightness of the firmament, unto the soul of Olema Behar, the daughter of Jose and Matilda, who has ended eternity and in whose memory we offer charity. May her repose be in paradise. O God of mercy, let her find refuge in your eternal presence, and let her soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is her inheritance. May she rest in peace, and let us say, Amen.
This does conclude the service here in the chapel. The family will be receiving condolences at Nissin and Cindy's home, 297 Camden Place in Vernon Hills, today following the interment until 5 p.m., tomorrow from 6 until 9, and then Sunday from 1 until 5. That information is on your folder, so if you didn't get one when you enter the chapel, please get one when you leave. That information is also on our website. Interment will take place at Shalom Memorial Park, that's 1700 West Rand Road in Arlington Heights. The procession will be forming in the parking lot. Please keep in mind a few safety features while in the procession. Keep your bright headlights on at all times. Put your emergency blinkers on. Attach the orange funeral sticker to the passenger portion of your front windshield, and we will also attach a flag to the roof of your car. And please stay as close as safety permits to the car in front of you. The following people have been selected to serve as pallbearers. When I call your name, if you please come forward. Jose, Nissin, and Israel Behar. Joe, Benhabib, Robert, Benhabib, Pedro, Volley. At this time, I would ask that everyone please rise as the family and the rabbi are escorted from the chapel. Pallbearers? Okay, we're going to line up behind this gentleman here. 2 by 2. Follow right behind. Yeah, we're going to do all of that. Oh. Thank you. Thank you. This does conclude the service. Thank you.